So welcome everybody. Today we're on session 6. I'm Diana Gray. I'm Community Marketing Manager for America. And we have Rivathi with me today. And Anna Maria helps us in the background. Manjula is the founder. She's also one of our partners for this program. And they'll be doing a career session later on this month. So we're on session 6 today. So congratulations on making it this far. That's pretty exciting. So we're going to be doing a recap and mini hands-on practice for session 6. So I'll go through that in just a second. But before then, I just want to tell you who's on the call today. So speaking today will be Will and Rahul, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Also on the call today are Mason and Jeffrey and Rivathi, who will be helping out with chat. So Will and Rahul, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, my name is Will. I'm one of the MVPs, and I work at Purdue University as a senior AI engineer for RPA. And so I help lead our team with regard to using UiPath to build automations uh, across the enterprise. And one of our specific ones that we're doing right now is with SAP. So you'll see a demonstration kind of simulating some of that today. It's great to meet all of you.
Great, thank
Perfect.
you. And Rahul?
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Rahul Goyal, Senior Director. I work for a company called Ellucian. We are UiPath customer, but I'm UiPath MVP for a couple of years now. Work very closely with Diana and her team, and then we use heavily SAP internally, and then UiPath to facilitate and supplement some of the automations for the day-to-day processes standpoint. Yeah, so happy to be joining this session today to continue this series, which we started a few weeks ago, to get you one of the more critical topic from a development standpoint at how do we do troubleshooting. So we're going to talk more today, and then we share some of our real life examples, as Bill mentioned, and then also get you some tips and tricks as to what to keep in mind, what to consider. So that's our hope that after this session, you'll have good starting point as to how to get debugging and how to troubleshoot some of the real life scenarios. So looking forward to the session.
Great, thank you. So as you guys know, we are recording these sessions, and I will put in chat when this material is available, which it should be tomorrow. And then the other thing I just want to bring up is that I will put in the important links that you all have access to that. And if anybody still has any questions about certification, please let me know because next week is our last 2 sessions. So the way that works, and I will just say it one more time, is that for the certification, you need to finish everything in this learning path. You need to then get the UiPath credential. If you have that and can email me a picture of it, I will work to get you a certification voucher, but I'm not going to do it for people who have not finished the entire series and gotten that training credential. I just want to make sure that you guys have followed up, and we also will give you an extra month. So we on the last day on the 8th session, which is next Wednesday, we're going to go through about 5 or 6 topics of additional content that you need to finish in order to get your credential, which is why we give you an extra month to make sure that you finished everything. And you can always reach out to me, so I will make sure that my name and email address is in the chat as well. And then if you have any questions about any of this material, as I've mentioned before, please just go to the forum. It's in one of the important links that I will post on this site, and make sure that you ask those questions. All the people, all the MVPs you guys have been meeting over the last 3 weeks are involved in helping us answer these questions, as you will see when you engage in chat today. So anyway, that's where we are. We're really excited to have you here today, and I will be putting the URL for Monday session also in the chat. So with that, I'm gonna just stop sharing and pass this over to Rahul.
I got it. Perfect. Hope you can see my screen with the topic for today. So good. Thanks, Diana. And
Mhm.
thanks everyone for joining us today. As I said earlier, so today's topic is more talking about as you learned in the last, I think, 4 sessions, 5 sessions, as to get started on the development, how to build an automation, how to get started from a studio standpoint, which is great. But then there's a critical component from a development standpoint as to how do we do the exception handling? How do we do the error handling? Without that, the development technically is not completed until you have the decent exception handling and error logging put in place. So we're going to talk today about what UiPath Studio support and provide, what type of tips and tricks and the technical the options which are out there in the studio as to how do we make it more robust from a development standpoint. So it's going to be more engagement, and we're expecting a lot of Q&A. So feel free to ask anything in the chat as you get into this topic, and if something comes up from your real life example where you are trying to understand as to how best you should be using it, feel free to put it in the chat. We're happy to address and answer as much we can in today's session, and then also connect with you all offline if you need to connect with us later. So like I said earlier, so we'll be more talking about how do we do more smartly in terms of the when you start building the automation. If you look at from a real world automation projects and the successful implementation, just to give a background as to why it is important, right? Why error and exception handling is critical. So in a real life scenarios, if you look at it, all the scenarios are never straightforward. Yes, in the ideal state, nothing is broken. You build your bot and then things work the way you expected, but that's not how it works in the real life cases. Things fail. The most of the time, the typical use cases could be that suddenly an application is crashing for some unknown reasons, right? Or maybe if it's a web interface, you learned it in the last few sessions, there are some selectors. There could be some upgrade or a patching that got pushed recently that could change some of the selectors. In that case, that could be another reason why your bot could fail. Some of the files are missing, right? You may be working on a file, and that could cause some of the bot to fail, or maybe the data coming in suddenly invalid, which is not expected from your standpoint. So just to, I think, and maybe some network is changed. So there could be some real life unexpected reasons that could cause a bot or an automation to fail. In that case, if you have a weak error handling, you can imagine that how disruptive the automation could be, how the productivity could be lost. In that case, the bot could end up doing retry in many cases if there's no proper handling of an error. The transactions could get stuck in the middle. The data could get corrupted if in a production scenario you are running a bot which is not properly handled from a invalid data standpoint. You could have a wrong data getting processed. And then your support team, if you're a support team supporting this automation, you'll be struggling to diagnose these issues forever, right? So I think there are like, so that tells that there's a decent need for us to be very careful as we're building this automation to make sure that these errors and everything is getting handled properly, and then make sure that you are doing a proper logging also, because when you do troubleshooting, you need to also make sure that the errors are getting captured, not only getting caught, but also getting captured as the logs in the system. So you can troubleshoot later as to at what point the bot failed, at what point the transaction stopped processing. So there's enough logging in the system. And then before you get into production, how do you troubleshoot it? How do you put a breakpoints in between the project so that you can do some error handling and make sure you're putting all the right checks and balances in the system. So I think those are some of the topics we're going to talk today to help you understand the whole journey from the life cycle standpoint, and why is it critical to make some of these checks and the proper handling is required. So there are multiple ways. I'm just going to quickly at least give you some quick overview and talking points as to why and what's out there from a true UiPath standpoint. And then we'll jump into some of this building also hands-on to show you how exactly this works in the system. So if you look at from exception standpoint, there are multiple reasons why an exception could handle, right? Typically, the two reasons. It could be system exception, it could be business rule exception, right? So the system exception, think of a way that maybe it's not much in your control, but something, as the term system says, suddenly an application is crashed, or like I said earlier, the selector is not found, or maybe timeout due to some latency in the process or something, or maybe networking, some of the network got dropped. These are all which as a human we cannot control, but these are very tangible exceptions that could happen as in the process of any automation running in production, right? But then there are some business exceptions which you want to forcefully put in the automation also, right? So that you can catch it early enough before it causes any disruption in your processes, before it gets the bad data gets processed and cause further damage in your from a business standpoint. So those are like business rule exceptions we are intentionally putting in to catch any type of invalid data. Maybe the format of the data is wrong, or maybe the data which is coming in is not expected to come in to process certain transactions in the system. So you have to catch those invalid data as a business exception. You want to put some validation in place just to make sure that input is correct the way it should be. It has enough validations to confirm that all the key inputs that's needed to process the data is coming in correctly the way it should be coming in. You want to make sure that there's no duplicate transaction coming in, right? So sometimes there could be hiccups or the bugs in the source system that's pushing the transactions to the downstream system. You make sure that you're capturing any duplicate transactions, or make sure it doesn't violate any of your business rule validations and some other true data checks which are required. So those are the things which you need to be very careful to make sure that your automation is designed to handle both type of an exception. Even the system exception is unexpected, but you still have to catch it, right? If it happens as a network outage, your bot should be smart enough to handle that outage and then at least exit out of it, or maybe retry, or maybe do something else. Some behavior is expected that you are from an unknown standpoint. Those are typically two types of an exceptions we see in a typical real world scenario, which you would see that UiPath handles both type of exceptions, whether it's a system exception or a business exception. And then how you handle both the exception varies as to what outcome you expect when an exception is caught. In some cases, you might be saying, okay, it's a good exception, I'm catching it, but I'm okay to move on because it's an expected behavior. I expected some duplicate transactions, but now I'm going to parse it through and then move on to next stage on my automation. In some cases, you might be saying it's a completely junk data. There's nothing I want to proceed. I have to exit out of it. Or in some cases, it's a truly selector not found. Then you may have to you may retry some other positioning. So it all depends what's your requirement is. Accordingly, you want to decide how you want to catch it as an exception, and then what action you want to take it as a result of that action, right? Typically, what happens is you will see this more in the live example also when we show it, and most of it I'm sure have heard about it, called like try catch, right? Basically, that's how you basically capture any exception. You're saying, I want to try my main logic, but if something fails or something gets happen in that main logic, how do I catch it? Catch is a term which we say, okay, now if something fails in the try part, jump into the catch part, because now I want to catch my exception there, which could be system exception, which could be business exception. And then finally, when you catch it, what is my end result, right? Do you want to kill the process? Do you want to keep going? Do you want to go back into try mode and then move to next step? So I think that's a very typical three-stage process. You try something as your main logic. If something fails, you jump into the catch section of it, you catch it, and then accordingly you decide in the final section as to how you want to proceed next. So that's a very typical three-step flow. You will see that to catching any type of an exception. And within this catch, we'll talk next in a few slides that how do you capture some of those error messages. So that's more like a logging, which is another topic for today. That how when an exception happened, you want some meaningful information as to what exactly went wrong, right? There could be some technical reasons, but then many times if you don't catch it, put a proper log messages, you might get some very decrypted or very technical sort of messages which may or may not be that meaningful to you as to how when it comes to troubleshooting it. So you want to make sure you're putting a proper log messages to capture the transaction ID or the source data, or maybe exactly a point where it failed, so that you can troubleshoot it at a stage as to what exactly happened, and then how do I recover at that point, and then so you can finally go to the next stage on the project. So I think that's a like in our real life example, I've seen that the use cases which we typically capture in my team, in my company here, like which is an SAP system you're running. Many times an external system is not even sending the type of a data. If I'm expecting to receive any data from external system, it's not coming over, but a bot is running, and then I need to do something. My file handling, how do I handle my file, which is expected but not coming in the right format? The technically could be an API call. Some of the API call is not happening, or maybe it's not returning the right type of information, or is timing out the way it should before it can fail. Or maybe database is not responding. So there could be various reasons in the real life, but then making sure that you have a proper section, so the try, catch, and final to handle any type of a unknown events that could happen in your automation, right? So that's on. I just purposely left it blank here. This slide versus throw versus rethrow, and we'll cover more into the examples as we get into that. But the concept here is basically like when you're catching an exception, more like how do you throw an exception, how do you catch an exception, and then many times after you throw it, then you have to rethrow also. It might look very from a terminology standpoint, you're throwing something and then you're rethrowing something, because if you have very nested kind of a automation, very advanced and nested automation, there could be multiple stages where an exception could be thrown. But then how do you get to the exact point where the first point of exception was, and that's where the rethrow comes in. So without talking more theoretical in this one, so I will show you some of this example as to how exactly the throw and the rethrow work. But this is critical that for you to be aware that there is a not only just to throw and catch an exception, but also find out how do you bring the exception on the top of it? How do you make sure that when you looking into an exception logs at the later stage, you jump back into what was my starting point, where exactly my exception failed and all. That's where the rethrow helps you into that. So that's where this we'll see more as a live example into the difference between when you throw it versus when you rethrow it. Like I said earlier, then there are multiple retry scope you can do as to when an exception is caught. Now, what to do based on that? You could be saying that, okay, if a selector is changed and I'm trying to click a button, do I give up at one first click itself, or do I want to retry multiple times? That okay, keep checking about, can you keep looking into that? If a click button is found, maybe try for 3 times before you finally give up and then throw an exception, right? So you in that case you use a retry, that if you have a click is failed or if an element is not found. Sometimes your web page takes time to launch because due to your network issues or some other reasons, could be that it's just taking time to launch the entire page and then it's not finding the right element in the first place itself. You may want to give it a retry again just to see, okay, let's try one more time, or let's try 2 times just to confirm that it's not a network glitch or something, right? So that's very critical also to you don't want infinite retry also, so that it's stuck in an infinite loop also, but you don't want to give up also too soon, just in case it's due to some systematic technical issue, the page is not launched in that case. So I think it's very critical to decide, do you want to try for 3 times? Do you want to pause? You can put some seconds also. You can say, okay, wait for 5 seconds before you retry, just to confirm that everything is fully accessible or there on the screen. So there are different variations you can use on the retry scope, which is another good feature to introduce before you finally decide to fail a bot. And then there are some global exception handlers, which is basically you will see that again in the system, but then the purpose is more when there are 2 types of automation. I'm sure you heard in the first few sessions. You can be running an attended bot and an unattended bot, which is more like Attended is technically when if it's more running on a user machine, human has more control on the automation, right? So you're still seeing the execution on your screen. You know better as to what's getting failed and why is it bots getting stuck somewhere. You know that my input is wrong or my but it's not. It's very decentralized kind of a process running locally on your machine. You have still some bad control on of a type of an exception that could happen. But many times in real life, you also look into some unattended bots running on AWS workstation or some other remote machines, which as an end user, you have no direct control as to how or what could the reasons why things are happening. So in that case, you may define some global exception handlers where you are catching some unhandled exceptions. Even in that case, if something is not handled technically in your automation from a development standpoint, you still want to catch it so that as an overall framework and a blanket exception around it where you can say, okay, you still retry, you can still ignore it, you can abort it, because as a human, I have no control on my actions there, but it's critical for me to exit out or do something even if it's running on a remote machine. So those type of things are there. You need to be also very familiar with that as to when to use global exception handlers versus local exception handlers so that you can, and that depends on the type of an automation you're building and how what type of a use case you're looking, and therefore accordingly you can decide what type of an exception you want to handle into a system to there. And without getting into technical into this one, this is just some of the terminology I wanted to introduce here. More like there are different type of states we can say. If the state gets into, I'm sure in one of the topic we talked about the state machines where you have where you initialization and then you some get transactions and the processes and the end process. At each stage, you can actually define your exceptions. Like your initialization could fail, but if initialization worked but your get transaction failed, or if your get transaction worked, but your processing is failing, or if the processing worked, but then before you exit, you have a fail. So every stage on the state machine, you could have some sort of exception, but then how you handle the exception varies. Your decision to do a system exception versus business exception could vary, and what stage on the automation you are in, right? So it's a very nice way, I think, how UiPath handle the exception handling and provide all type of flexibility as to what makes more sense from a use case standpoint, whether you want to fully abort it as a system exception or you want to, if it's a transaction is received, but then when processing, you found a duplicate transaction. It's not a system failure, but you found a duplicate transaction. You want to handle it in a different way as compared to launching my SAP GUI. I'm trying to log in into SAP, but my launch itself failed in the initial stage itself. That's a truly exit criteria for me as compared to my system. SAP is launched, but now inputting a data, I found some duplicate transactions. That's a different type of a handling. You may want to do a unique count or something. So so every stage on the automation as it goes through has a technical mechanism, how you want to handle it. And then based on the nature of the process, you need to decide as to how to handle that exception. Just want to run through a few more topics and then I'll hand it over to Will to show us in the system also. Like I said earlier, not only catching the exception, but also logging the right type of a message is super critical, right? And then in that case, there's some best practices. Do you want to log it as an info? Like if I'm sure in a typical, what you see that some of the messages are more like information messages. Something went wrong, fine. It's just information for me. I can move on. Or it's just a warning for me. Yes, it looks like the data is corrupted, but it's not that bad enough for me to damage anything. I can still move on, but it's just a warning that's been raised in the system in the process. Or some are very error, like you're saying it's a red error, guys. I can't move forward because it's a wrong data, bad data. I have to stop at that point, or it's a fatal error. So I think accordingly based on the type of a use case and the type of an error you're catching, the logging is very critical, and make sure that it's a good error, good log example. Sometimes we're seeing that people just say processing failed as a log. That may or may not be giving enough information for you to react to that so at least you have some decent naming convention as to how you're logging the errors, like transaction ID, and then the technical transaction ID plus failed due to selector timeout. So that when you go back in later into your messages, you know at what stage my bot failed and what could be the reason. The other thing which we are seeing is that the bad practice is that never log. You can technically log anything in the automation, but then you have to be very careful that you're not violating your InfoSec policies or you're not unnecessarily logging the confidential data into the logs. So like passwords, if you're using a bot to log in to a machine and your logins are shared on the asset as an asset somewhere and you're using those credentials to log in, never log your passwords as in the messages. Vague log like error occurred. So I think we have to be careful as to what not to capture as a log. But then on the other side, what is the right type of information you should be keeping in mind to log it so that it becomes a meaningful when it comes to later stage from a troubleshooting standpoint. These are some of like I took some examples from our system as to the type of an exception. The very first exception I typically put when you do an SAP automation is that we do a lot of RFCs and the API call automation from SAP. One of my bot which runs every day is to unattended machine. Bot logs in into SAP and then it is a process. Exchange rate maintenance in SAP, where we receive the exchange rate from external system and then we process those exchange rate in the system and we call some APIs or the RFCs from a SAP terminology standpoint in the system, and then we pass on some input parameters. Many times you're seeing that when you call those APIs or the RFCs, the call or the function call to that API failed because either you are passing on the wrong parameters or you have a so some of these automations required some packages to be installed also. We covered that in the first few sessions to find out the right type of a package that's required for this automation to work. And if you're missing some of those packages, some of this the automation and how you're using those APIs will not work, or maybe invalid credentials. My system administrator changed the password, but he or she did not inform me that the credential are changed logging into SAP system. So that could be another error that could happen from a system standpoint. But then those are all except valid root causes. Nothing wrong in that. It could happen anytime, but then making sure that we have enough way to handle it. I validate my input, like I said earlier. You make sure you're validating your input, make sure you have enough retries, make sure you handle it properly and throw an exception the way it should be. Make sure you're logging the right type of information. So I think these are more real life that things happens, but then making sure that you have a recovery plan as to how you recover out of that situation. Same thing. Another case here where we have the invoice coming in, we get the vendor invoicing every day, and then bot is picking up those invoices and then processing the data in the system, and then similar type of an exception. Sometimes the file not found, or bot is still running. The first check I do is, does my file exist or not, right? As compared to simply assuming the file always exists is a bad design. But I would first check that, hey, if my file exists or not. If it does not exist, I abort my processing, nothing can be done. If it exists, then I continue, right? So, and automating in Excel is sometimes tricky, sometimes it's an easy also, but there are a lot of validation you should be careful about if you're automating your processing around an Excel data coming in. How is it the right data? Is it the Excel still accessible? Are you able to open the Excel? So those type of things which are also need to be considered. Web automation, I think I captured it already, just to fast forward so we can more look into system also, but more like I said earlier, so make sure that there's enough retry, pause, and the wait time factoring into your automation so that the selectors and the click buttons are accessible before the page is loaded or before the element exists in the system. So make sure the web automation has those type of which is a very common use case. The web automation, Excel automation, system level automation, the applications like SAP automation, those are very common use cases for any business scenario. But making sure that the expected or the failures that could happen are properly caught, and then so that you have a right path forward on that automation. I just wanted to at least call out what we covered so far as to the common mistakes and the best practices. The mistake which we've seen is, like I said earlier, empty catch block. Like you should always catch something, but don't leave it empty, because if you leave it empty, bot doesn't know what to do at that point. It comes to the catch block technically, but then do what? Like it has to have something, some action should be there on the catch block. You should have proper logging. Without any logging, there's no meaningful information generated for you to react to that. You should not have any in-flight loops of retry in-flight time. There should be some tangible or some checks there as to when to retry. All your system external dependency, you can only control your internal dependency. There are some unknown factors outside of your automation. External systems are down, or the network failure happens, your VPN is down. You should always try to wrap with the global exception handler some of the unknown dependencies. Be very careful about the business exception versus system exceptions. How do you log it? How do you clean up your final block? I think those are some of the good best practices which you should be keeping in mind, that helps you to smooth and streamline your automation, and then avoid some of the things which could hurt the performance and the system behavior and the user experience from the automation standpoint. With that said, before we jump into the debugging, I'm going to stop sharing and give it to Will. So, like, what are the concepts we covered so far, the loggings, and how do we use the try catch? So we can see now in the as an example also, just to connect the dots there. So over to you, Will.
There we go. We don't use Zoom at Purdue, we use Teams, so I always have to remember how to use the unmute button. So,
Okay.
Hi everybody, my name is Will. So I wanted to kind of build a really quick demonstration that kind of represents like how we would use this in production. So like I mentioned earlier, we're working with SAP GUI, so I decided to build something that interacts with SAP GUI for you. I know that the template that we're using here is more of the professional track, but I want to kind of showcase it real quick. So this is the RE framework. And so we're using this, and this handles a lot of that exception handling, and you can customize it. And as you can see, depending upon the flow, depends on, is it an exception and it ends, such as if we can't initialize everything, that's going to go away. If we can initialize it, then we try to get a transaction, a queue item, process it, and then depending upon how it processes, goes here and there. So one of the things I wanted to show here is that this init all applications, which I'm going to demonstrate here in just a moment, that is contained within a try catch. And so you'll see, I'm going to just kind of pull this down a little bit so that when this fails, we understand what's going to catch it and how it's going to try to process it and handle it. And so there we go. I think there it is, right there. Let me do this for the future. So this is another neat feature that you can use. You can bookmark. So not only do you have breakpoints, but you have bookmarks that can allow you to quickly get to different parts of your automation. So as you can see, I've already had this kind of lined up. So I'm going to describe what's going to happen because there's a lot of information on the screen. This is going to try to log into SAP GUI, which is over here. It's going to try to go to the QA environment, and it's going to fail. And the reason it's going to fail is because scripting is not enabled for that tenant. This is not contained in a retry because it has, if I remember correctly, it has a retry interval. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind is some of these activities have retries built in, and so you can leverage those as well. And inside, if it could open up the application, we see login, and then there's some custom logging here that I'll describe after it fails, so that it specifically pertains to the login screen when you put in the password, the username, and you try to connect to the client. So let me run this real quick, and we'll see that message. And so I'm going to actually use a step into to help control it. I know it's going to fail. It's going to try. You'll see some log message. See, popped open. Can't do it. This activity has some built-in attempts as well because of that retry. So it's going to try to recover. It's going to try to get you connected, and then it's going to fail. And if we look over here, it provides a nice, thankfully, this activity provides a nice, helpful message, which is scripting's turned off. And so we know that the cause of the issue is the scripting's turned off. Within this section here, it's going to generate that exception all the way up here. It's going to get caught. So, it's going to generate the exception within the try. This is a try catch, so it's going to catch it. I put in some specific catches. And that's one of the great things too, is like, as you get more of a feel of what you can expect to fail and where, you can help customize those catches to get more granular on it. This activity actually will not throw a scripting exception. I've tested it several times. It will throw a system exception. And so because this is a catch-all for system exceptions, there's not going to be a custom message, but because that message is so specific, I'm okay. One of the things I will show over here is that, so we know it's going to fail. And this is, but let's say I want to make sure like it will be successful. I can use the immediates panel to actually change. Let's say I'm debugging on my machine. I'm like, that's kind of weird. And so I want to say, I want to test in real time since I've got it in debugger. Well, is the dev working? So I can just set that value to something else. I'm watching it here. It's changed over. I can see it here as well within the locals. And what I'm going to try is I'm going to do a retry. And that retry will retry this activity. And so I'm going to step in again. Just going to try to use it. And because I don't want to use my queue items yet. So as you can see, it's going through the different layers. So we're in a retry, and I'm using the retry above the try catch because it's possible that there could be some connection issues when it's trying to log in. So I want it to catch it, but try it again. So that's why it's nested. I'm going to go in here. Okay, we're going to see what happens. Does it successfully log in? And it does. And so just kind of looking at how we can use the try catches, the retry scopes, and these different exceptions to provide recovery, but also to provide information that's helpful for us on what failed and when. So let's say the login failed. So just note, if I actually fail this account, it will get locked. That's why I'm not going to demonstrate it, but we can see there's a login exception. And so I've got a message here that specifically tells me that login failed, and it captures that message as well. And then I'm going to rethrow it because it's within a try catch. I want to rethrow it so it goes all the way up into the RE framework and gets handled there. I also have a scripting exception here. So let's say it was able to open up that login panel that we saw, but then scripting failed, or it couldn't, or the scripting connection couldn't like catch. I wanted to keep that there as well, just in case scripting failed during this process. And then I've got a log message that says scripting failed with following error. And so that just really helps me understand what happened when and what do I need to do next. So I think I'll just so that's kind of this part. And then the next part will show you, we'll talk about more business exceptions after Rahul's next group of slides.
Do you want to, while you're sharing the screen, maybe cover that one, or do you want make the next topic? I was going to talk more on the debugging front, which if you want to pick up that now or want to do after my slide, we can do that also.
Let's do your slides if that's okay, and I'll get it all hooked up. So
okay, good. Let me get back to my screen. So yeah, so I think that's good. I think that's kind of how I was trying to hint in my earlier talk, that some of those SAP login things, and you saw that how the credentials are there. How does the scripting, which is not a business level thing, but somehow somebody turned off the SAP scripting on at the server level, that suddenly just disrupted the first step itself, that the bot itself cannot log into the SAP. Forget about invoice processing or anything else as a subsequent step. The bot itself couldn't log into the SAP GUI. The first step itself failed because server level scripting is turned off. That's a very good example of catching it and rethrowing it at the first stage itself. And then after that, you give up and then you capture the nice message that, hey, the scripting is turned off. Go fix it first before you run it again. So I think that's a good segue into as you doing some of it. First of all, now we're going to talk about some of the debugging concept, but then the keep thing, and one thing to keep in mind is that when you say debugging, this is never in production, but it helps you to reduce your production downtime. When it's so debugging is why it is critical, right? So it's a more from a developer standpoint, as you're building your bot, you have to make sure you can debug you're doing your functional testing as you're going through the technical testing or the functional testing. You're in a position to run it in debug mode, so we can put enough checks and breakpoints and then validations enough early in the automation itself, so that it avoids my downtime. You can see real time when you debug it as to what type of a exception is potentially could happen, what type of a input is coming, so I can catch accordingly, right? Why it is critical, like we said earlier, I think we have kind of said it enough so far that it could be technical reasons, data reasons. So you need to make sure in the debug mode, you are monitoring and in a position to see what could be my reasons at that stage, why bot could fail, right? Which will end up resulting reduce your downtime in the production if you have enough debugging done early enough and then accordingly captured all the logs and all the exceptions properly. It's going to help you from a user experience and the efficiency standpoint. It helps you as a developer. If you do a root cause analysis, you're in the middle of your building a your bot, and then you suddenly have to debug it. The better way of doing it is to run it in the debug mode, like how Will was showing. You can run in one step at a time, just to make sure that it's going into step by step, or you can just say, okay, just run it, right? Like, so there are multiple ways you can do. If you say run it, it basically executes normally. It doesn't pause anywhere. The limited exception inspection you get there at the end, but it's a faster. If I have to just execute it without stopping it anywhere in the middle, all I'll do is I'll just click run, so that it goes through every stage until it fails somewhere. If it doesn't fail, it will just start to finish behind the scene. It will give me a result. That's one way of we can run it. But then that doesn't work all the time, right? You have to debug it. That means you may have to go through step-by-step execution. You make sure that you have enough breakpoints put in the system, or watch points put in their automation, so you can accordingly troubleshoot it. But keep in mind that none of these breakpoints work in production. This is only in a non-production situation when you are looking to troubleshoot it, make sure you fine-tune your automation, then you put your breakpoints, the watch point in the system. You want to inspect as to what's coming in your variables. In the watch point, you can monitor that, hey, I expected ABC or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as an invoice number. What exactly real time I'm getting this value in my variable? You can inspect it. You can on the fly change some of those values as you're debugging it, so that you can at least keep going. So it's critical that you understand the difference between run mode and the debug mode, so you can accordingly see, do I need step-by-step debugging in the like that in the debugging panel. I'm sure we'll cover that there are multiple ways of doing it. You can step into like you was one step at a time. You can say one step, I want to every step on my automation, I want to stop it and see the behavior. I want to step over. If you're calling a nested API call, you want to get into the details inside of that. You know that function, the sub function, is working fine. I don't need to get into the details of my sub API call. I can step over that so that I can keep going to the next step, or you can step out. You're already into the into the debugging, into the details, but then you know that everything looks okay. Let me step out of it to go back to where I started. You can step out of it. You can put breakpoint. You can do slow step. So there are multiple ways. You can use the tools which is out there to facilitate how detailed you want to do the debugging, or how to what level of debugging you have to get into. So those are the variations already out there in the studio, which will show you in the system after this in the demo. I think that's we covered already. I think kind of touch point at what is the breakpoint basically, right? In fact, I should have said that earlier before we get into the specific as to you want to pause, as the term breakpoint says, you want to pause the execution at a specific activity. You just put a breakpoint there. You're saying up to that point, I'm okay to run it in a regular mode, but then stop at that activity so I can troubleshoot. I can see what information coming up to that point, right? There are multiple ways you can enable it. There is a right click it, and then you can say toggle breakpoint. There's some F9 shortcut, and then I think, but then it depends at what stage you want to put a breakpoint. Before I do my external call, I want to put a breakpoint just to confirm that before I hand over the next stage on the automation to external system, do I have enough or a valid data to pass it on to the external system? Is my validation if else condition working or not working, if my input is coming in the way it should be coming in. So I think there are various reasons why you should be debugging it. There are some guidelines as to what is the best practices as to how you and at what stage you should be putting a breakpoint. Like I said earlier, step into basically you goes in whatever workflow you're invoking, you get into step by step into that workflow. That is step into. Step over, there's a sub workflow defined, but there's no need for you to get deeper into the sub workflow. You can do step over, step out. You exit the current workflow, returns to where you started. Slow step is basically you put some. It takes some time in the execution. It helps you visualize the UI behavior. If it's a selector you're debugging, there's some timing issues. It just pause and put some gap sort of as it before it jumps into the next step. That sometimes is critical if you're doing a web automation. In that case, you want to slow down your execution just to make sure that is it truly just a timing issue that's causing it to it could fail, or something else going on. So in that case, you can use a slow step also. The common issues, I think we kind of touched already, but just wanted to still reiterate some of the common issues when you want to debug is that, yes, you want your selector not found. Like in that case, there are some activities you want to use the highlight activity, which tells you that when you get to that point, it highlights that, hey, what section on the screen my bot is trying to find something. If a click button or something is there, you can use the highlight feature over the activity over there. You can increase the timeout. Like I said earlier, selector not found. So let's increase some timeout, or some dynamic variable attributes are not there. So, or it could be we're trying to debug if it's a null reference, like in my earlier example, I said you're calling some RFC on the SAP side, but then is my variables getting initialized the way it should be? So for an RFC or an API to function the way it should function. If I found my file or not, like I want to debug it that at this point, does my file exist or not? Right? If not, then how do I print my full file path? That is it coming from the location I expected the file to come in? If it's a database type of accessible, then could be that your column name, maybe one of the recent upgrade changed the column name, and now your bot is not finding that column name. How do I debug that? Hey, what is the reason? So it could be null values. The data table itself is empty. In some cases, then you want to put some checks like check my row count. Do I have enough rows in the database table before I can proceed? So you may want to put a breakpoint there to see how many count of rows I'm receiving at that point. What is my column name coming in at that point in time? So if it is failing, why exactly it's failing? So these are some of the common debugging issues which truly demand that you should be considering to do some debugs. Same thing, I think I'm going to skip over. We covered already most of it in the previous slide as to when you debug it, then it helps you to see what type of a logging you should be capturing it here and what level of a log you should be capturing on that one. I'm going to just move on to the next one. Again, similar to the exception handling, just wanted to throw it out there, the common mistakes and the best practices. Uh, the common mistake is that sometimes I've seen that the warning messages, we ignore it, but they sometimes could become fatal errors in the future. So you still might want to make sure that you're paying some attention, even though it's a warning message. You should never be doing logging any sensitive data or overuse any delay. Like don't put a delay of like 5 minutes. Like there should be some real reasons as to why you're delaying something. Don't test any means sometimes we say that hey, we test the common cases, but there are always some edge cases. There are always some exceptions in every process. Vendor invoicing is coming in, but we know that typically this type of an invoice comes in. It has the expense line, it has the vendor line, but then sometimes it has a tax line also. Vendor is charging tax to us, and that's an edge case for us maybe, but we need to make sure that you're capturing some of the edge cases also, right? And then some of the exceptions, making sure sometimes we ignore it, but you never know in production, you may get into some of those exceptions also, right? So making sure that you have a proper try catch, you make sure all your cases are properly covered or put a global exception handler at the minimum so that you can capture any outliers in your exception. And then you have a clearly defined success and a failure path as to how you want to proceed forward. So those are some of the debugging. It's all connected together. It's not one piecemeal. So how you capture your exceptions, how do you do your log messages, and then when you debug it, that tells you enough that hey, at what stage you should be putting a log message and what type of information you should be capturing, and you're debugging it. How do you validate the right type of input coming? It's all connecting together, which is helping at the end to make an automation which is truly more a production ready, real time scenario ready automation. So with that, Will, I'm going to pass it over back to you to continue from your last demo from exception handling standpoint, and then show us some of the breakpoints and how you truly troubleshoot step into step over kind of scenarios in the system.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Rahul.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to do. So in order to the next section is going to be the processing. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here so that when it hits here, we can go through these different tools more specifically. One of the things I want to make sure I share so I don't forget it is so here's your slow step up here, and it's got 4 settings. So you click it, it's very hard to see. So I'm just going to, but if you click it once, you'll see as a clock, the first 15 minutes. So that's ×1, ×2 is, halfway, ×3, ×4, and then you click it again and it's off. So that's just how to navigate slow step. We'll probably use it here because it can type really, really fast in SAP. The other thing that you can do, so as you're debugging and as you're troubleshooting and exploring, you might end up going down different paths in your automation workflows. And then that's away from where the error occurred or where the issue popped up and it stopped. And as you do that, it might be difficult or challenging, to say where's the activity that caused this. So you've got this focus. If you click focus, it brings you right back. So what we're going to do here is this is part of the try catch. So we know that it's on this landing page. This landing page is not where we want to be consistently to set up the application, SAP GUI. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this code. This T code or this page does not like this code. There's no real error, but it will throw an error. So I'm going to catch it, and I know that it's going to throw an error, but it's not really system breaking. So I'm going to throw it as it's trying to do it. cannot start transaction. Even though it says it can't start the transaction, it's exactly where I want it to be. But it throws an error. I'm going to handle it, right? But I'm going to log it so that I'm being honest with myself, my team, and the process. So I called it. I knew it's going to create this message, and I'm going to ignore the message and continue. And that's to help me and other people, because part of the logging is, if I'm asleep or I'm on vacation and something breaks, I need to have information that's helping the person who's on the ground on the keyboard solving it. So we're going to do that. And then if I do the step out, it'll just kind of go above that. And I'm going to continue. And so as it continues, it should get the next transaction item, which was really, really quick. And now we're in the process. And so I'm going to go over here. And so we see, I'm going to try to, actually, I'm going to do it this way. So we've got this transaction item, right? I'm going to add this to my watch panel. And that's because I really want to know what are the values for the transaction that's happening. So here's the ID, and then you can kind of click in here. And so inside my watch panel, I can get more information about that. And so we know that this transaction item has a reference this, and where's it at? And so it's got a lot of different data as well. Oh, there it is. And then specific content. So this is the file name that I'm looking for. And because I want to make sure that the file exists before I go look it up. And so I'm going to step in. I'm going to not step, yeah, step into. So that's going to go from here to there. So this is going to do an if. I've actually removed one of the files, so we should see an error. I can't remember exactly which one. So as was mentioned before, if I do a step over, it won't go down here. So I'm going to do step over, step into, and now it's down here. So I'm going to slow step it to hopefully provide a little bit more time to see. And I'm going to continue. And this continue will go through this process, but as it goes back for the next transaction item, it's going to hit that breakpoint at the top so that we can begin it again. So let's continue. It calls it. We're in slow step, so it's slowing down a little bit more. And you can see that it found it. It's going to exit out. And then it should go all the way back up. As you can see, the slow step is kind of showing us a little bit more of the things that are happening along the way. So I'm probably, I don't know if it will let me do it in real time or not without breaking it. Let's see. But as you can see, that's how the slow step can work. Like it really slows it down, helps you to kind of investigate what's happening and why, especially if you're dealing with websites or applications where there could be a delay, and would a delay actually help it, or would it actually, hide the problem? So I'm going to remove this breakpoint so I can toggle it so I can see it, but I'm not going to activate it for next time because I'm just going to let these run. And then I'll just, we'll kind of see in the output panel what's going on. We should see okay, so we did not find the file. If that file's not there, it's not so much a system exception as it's a business rule exception for us. Because if the file's not there and we have other processes beforehand to handle that and to capture if the file is really not there, it most likely means somebody touched it and moved it manually. So we got that business exception. We're going to continue. It'll handle it. You'll see it kind of like as the RE framework handles it. But because we got other queue items, we want to make sure that we get those processed. So it's going to work through those other queue items. And you can see like as it's working. So it's working pretty fast. But the watch panel allows me to see how that value changes in real time. So I can kind of, if I could pause it at any point in time and I can see that value, The immediates panel allows me to change the value, like I mentioned earlier. And all these tools really help us to almost like a detective investigating what's going on. How is it operating? Is it operating as expected? If something, if an error gets thrown, we can dig in deep to explore what caused it, retry it, test it to kind of figure it out and resolve it and solve it. So that's it. I think I'll leave this screen up if that's helpful for people, if they have questions, or we can just stop the share and just talk person.
Yeah, I think at this point we just open up for Q&A. I know there's a lot of chat going on, but
Okay.
if there's anything anyone wants to come off mute and then maybe share some of your ongoing examples and maybe how you are handling it or anything you need some clarification, happy to stay and then address it.
Yeah, that's great. So if anybody has any questions, please come off mute and ask.
Yeah, I was trying to see if you could demonstrate the value of the variable, like when you are like running a workflow. Like I was going through homework or like prerequisites, and in an example, interest is calculated on the deposited money in the bank. So I kept getting zero interest earned. And I was trying to see how I can detect the value of the variable. So I couldn't do it, obviously. So I was trying to see if you could show how you can use either watch window, how you can do it so that you can see what the value that variable has in a specific like a step.
Gotcha. Let me try to set this up. So
maybe one of your screen where you're entering some of the invoice number on the SP screen. Maybe you can go to watch panel there to see what company code or what fiscal year you're in, like something maybe in the watch. I think in that case, it sounds to me the watch panel is the right thing to go and just invoke it and see what interest rate or what information you're receiving up until that point.
Yeah, all my queue items have finished, so I'd have to like reclone them super quick. But I think I can demonstrate what you're talking about.
Okay.
Just gotta
Yeah,
think
it
about
involved invoke workflow steps. So there was a sequence where the information is collected, and then that's getting invoked in another sequence. So there are arguments, and then also the variables.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not super complex, but I was just trying to see like what was wrong, and I put actually side by side the actual workflow that worked versus the one I built. I just couldn't figure it out. Yes, yeah. In general, I think that would be helpful to get that watch window and see what the value of the variable is.
Yeah. So I use the watch window when I have a specific, like, I mean, this is what it's for specific variables. But I also look at the locals to see like how's it pulling in? Is it what I expect? And here we go. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So right here, so here's a good example. I know that this value is going to fail. So what I can do here is I can add to watch. I can add to watch. I can even say, hey, I want to make sure like it's pulling the right credential. And I know, I mean, I can't look at the password, but I can look at the username. And that allows whatever is currently in the locals that's in this workflow, I can, instead of having, if this becomes noise for me, I can focus it on only the things that I want. Now,
Okay.
let me point up here, because this transaction, this value happens later. So because it happens later, it's not going to have any information here. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to remove it for now so we can kind of focus here. And this helps me look at, okay, when I get to this point in the automation, are the key variables, the key data, is it what I expect it to be? And that can pause it with that breakpoint. I can look at it, and then I can kind of go from there. So if there's let's say for whatever reason, this username was incorrect, and I know I pulled it from an asset in an orchestrator, I can say, what is going on? And then I can go double check my assets. And if those assets are good, then I can go up here and confirm, am I actually pulling the right asset name from the right folder, right? And that's a way I can kind of use this reference point to dig in deeper.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was going to go the immediates is more to do two different things, at least that's what I found. One is to provide a new value to the variable and confirm that value works, or how does it work, right? Because I can see that functionality. Another thing I've used it for is to, it's almost like it's basically like a command line in a sense, where I can put in different commands, and I can see what the output of that is. So if I want to say, here's the string, what if I bisect it in this manner with a substring? Does it actually pull out what I'm looking for? So I can test it in real time right there. So that's how I tend to use it. So, but here's the watch panel. Does that help? Does that kind of answer your question a bit? Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay. Awesome.
So George, something similarly on this. So these are like the straightforward variables, like string and all those integers. But if you have something like a complex like dictionary, how do you, and if you want to add a key at the real time, how do you do that?
That's a great. Okay, I'm going to make a guess because I've actually never done this personally. My guess is with the immediates panel, you could add a key. It would just be the command that you would use, whether you're in C# or VB, and it would most likely add it. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky in my experience. You can see, all these different, let's imagine something's a data table. You can dig in, this is a password, but you can dig into the different layers and you can see the different values. The config is actually a better one. Okay, so you see this here?
Yeah.
So then you can kind of see, what does that variable contain? And here are all the different parts. I've had some struggle editing this and saving it and making real-time changes inside of a complex. But my guess, I just haven't needed to do it, is inside the immediates, you could write the command that could make those adjustments, whether it's adding something or modifying something.
Okay.
Because I think I'm just going to advocate. I find this to be really, really, really powerful and very helpful. So.
Yeah. Also, another thing, like at times we can have our in the catch block, we can have our custom code. Like, okay, it's catching an exception, and then it should do some other operations as well, like send an email or anything like a notification. So that's like custom to each of the project. So can I add that as an activity, or so that I can use it throughout my workflow, not just one particular segment?
Yeah. Well, do you mean like, do you want to invoke a workflow, like say send email, and then you can invoke it? Yeah. Inside here, you can do whatever activities you can do outside of it.
Yeah. Okay. So we can add another activity, send an email. So now there's also another piece of like we have something similar segments ahead as well. Like it's a big workflow, and an exception happened, and the same we should also send out an email. So there also I don't want like I should be able to reuse this catch. That's what I mean. Like a common catch can be used at different segments. The way your activities are reusable, right? You just type in like a text, or is there a way to create our own activity and then we can use it at other places?
Oh, you mean like your own activity?
Yeah.
So you can do that. That's more advanced than the associate developer series, but yes, you can create your own activities. The other thing you could do, which might be a little bit more of a middle ground, is you can create libraries. So you could use your designer panel to like build out your different activities, bundle it together as a library
Mm.
component. And then as you pull in that library component here, it's going to look like an activity because it basically is one for the purposes of this automation.
Yeah.
So it's got its input, like it's got its in and out arguments, all that other stuff.
Yeah, same like a reusable function or something.
Yeah.
So that
Yep.
we don't have to do the same activity all the times. Like
No. Yeah, if you know that you're going to do something over and over and again, probably the library is going to be the best place for you.
okay. Thank you, by the way, for answering the question.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I don't know if we got to these, Will, but there was also some things in the chat. Can we get a screenshot of SAP GUI fails at any point? Can you show any SAP GUI script error handling?
You can. I think the screenshot is easy. I think, yeah, I think I replied back. Yeah, there's an activity
Okay.
to take screenshot. I think
I see it. Yeah.
you can use the activity to take a screenshot at that point if an SAP GUI has failed somewhere. The regular screenshot should help you to take a screenshot, and then you can capture that image and email it out or whatever you have to do with that one.
Yeah, let's see.
Great.
Yep. Exactly. Sorry, I thought they were asking me to do a screenshot in real time. So, but yes.
Yeah, no, within the SAP
Yeah.
stream, if you want to take a screenshot of what exactly happened or so the take screenshot helps you take a screenshot of the SAP GUI and then send it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had another question, but that's not related to this presentation. It's more related to Excel automation. So in one of the prerequisite classes, basically the presenter was able to select a file when he was building the activities. So he could click on like a director icon and then go to like a file explorer and select an Excel file and even open the Excel file and then select like a couple of cells, which I couldn't do, but I was just typing in based on his after he did that, and I was just typing in to get to the same result. So I don't know what the reason was. And when I looked at my like installs, I have the Excel plugin installed. So I don't know what I was doing wrong. So I couldn't get the icon, like the directory icon, to open those files and then point to cells. So because he had some I guess like buttons when he opened the Excel file, etc. So I was wondering what I was doing wrong to for me not to see the same functionality in building the workflow.
Yeah, Mason, was that you who did that?
No, actually, it was Diana. It was in one of the prerequisite classes. So they
Oh, gotcha.
simply show like how you can combine like multiple files into a single Excel file.
Okay.
That is the class. Basically, it's more user-friendly way of like building the workflow rather than like typing the file path and then cell reference, etc., etc.
I think it could be multiple ways, but I think multiple reasons. But I think maybe you may want to check your packages. Does it have anything that you may want to upgrade your package, or one of the Excel automation package is something you need to upgrade to the latest version. That could one reason if you want to start with that, just to confirm that your Excel automation package is up to date. But there could be some other reasons also. Maybe the Excel file is not there or some other things. But I would start with the package at least to see, just to confirm that you are using the latest Excel package of the automation, so that it's not causing any disruption due to that.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and feel free to put these kind of questions if we're not answering them here too on forum, because then we can work with you. Um, as well. You can put a screenshot in there or something like that, and we'll see if we can get back to you that way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
One thing I wanted to show, I kind of was, but I wasn't like talking because other people were answering questions. So if you want to kind of like look at like customizing your catches, like more like granular, you can select. It's kind of like for let me do this. It's kind of like choosing a variable data type. So you go down here, you can browse for types, and then you can search. That's so for SAP, they've got specific ones here that I can use, and then implement. Um, if you, I think somebody mentioned like an index out of bounds. So this might solve that if you're looking for this. And then like there's an all reference and stuff like that. So those are ways for you to, as you get comfortable with business exceptions and system exceptions and whatnot, you can customize your catches to be even more particular to handle the issues that could occur or to meet your needs.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think
Yeah.
those questions are pretty much done.
Do we have any more questions?
Right.
Yeah, and I'm just answering Nicole's question to me. Nicole, if you just want to reach out to me via email, I'm just putting my email um, in the chat to you. Okay. All right. So just always remember too that the chat has a lot of really good information. You guys make sure you're copying this stuff. And please make sure that you register for Monday's session. We want to see all you back. You only have one more week to go. And if you make it through this series, it's really valuable. This is really the foundation for starting the learning with UiPath products. So I'm really happy you guys have stayed the journey with us, and we'll continue. Don't remember, or just remember, we have all the support out there too to make sure that you guys are successful. So, any other questions before we close today? Okay. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you on Monday. Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.